Gabe, thank you for being here with me today. I really appreciate you taking the time to uh, go over these things with me. So, as you may know, I wanted to talk with you about the direct path and the implications that it's had on both of our lives. And so, just a little introduction to my friend Gabe here. Gabe is a teacher of the direct path and was actually the person that introduced me into the direct path through the law of one. And ever since then, my life has done a 360, and I just can't express how grateful I am to have had come across Gabe and his teachings and his interpretations of the law of one.
Thank you, Jay. Um, I have to say that obviously we have the same language in terms of what this understanding is, and these type of conversations just uh, kind of nourish this need that we all have, and that once we have focused our attention there, it just starts to build. So I want to thank you for inviting me to have this conversation, which other people might also nourish themselves with, especially if they are on this path in one way or another, and particularly if they resonate with the direct path, because as you said, that's been the direction for me. I didn't choose it; it kind of chose me, so to speak. And I think it did the same for you. So yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation and let it take where it went.
Right on. So, with that being said, why don't we start with, giving our viewers a little bit of an introduction into what exactly is the direct path? And I would love for you to do the honors.
Yeah, thank you. So um, I have to give my own spin to this because it's what I have discovered over time as I not only see our history and also our current situation in terms of spiritual understandings and teachings that we have out there. Uh, I feel like the direct path is just the essence of our understanding in non-duality. It's We call it the direct path because it's still a sort of method to approach the understanding of truth. Let's just call it truth. And when we look back in history, we find that the method or the approach to teach directly what the truth is has been used all over the world. The thing is that we humans love to give names to things and describe it as sort of disciplines and strategies, methods, and so on. And that's where we start to develop more progressive teachings, right? And later on, it becomes and it morphs into what we know as religion. So to me, the essence of the direct path, or simply knowing yourself, the truth of reality, is to be able to investigate that which is within, that which is actually within everything. And I think this has been used for thousands of years, Jay. And um, it's only when we look at it directly, when we say, "Oh, yes, I see that this is what they have all been talking about," and out of that is where we have built different methods. So to make or give some substance to what we call direct and progressive, we have to see that there is, forget about direct and progressive. There is just one understanding. There's one shared truth that we can all check within ourselves. And from that understanding comes the desire to talk about it, to express it, to teach it. Yes. And because our ways to do it are limited, we create approaches and methods and practices that can lead to that understanding. But as we know, this understanding is not something that just happens because of a sequential step or a program or a recipe. We don't have a recipe for this. And so we have different methods that we use for doing this. And this is what starts to create the progressive paths, which are all, of course, full of merit. They all have, there is a reason why they're so known, and they have been useful in the past, and they continue to be useful. But at some point, because we begin to use so many of these progressive paths, and we think that these are the only ways into which we can get to that truth, that understanding that is always present within us. We kind of yearn for this one-way approach. See, this is what we call the direct path. So in a way, if I can just summarize this, there is a truth that is available to all of us. Different parts of history, and we can get into this if you want, in different parts of history, we have seen that people realize this within themselves, and then they want to talk about it, right? Out of this talking, this expression, multiple methods are developed for trying to reach what the teacher, the original guru, tried to teach, right? And so it starts getting more of a body, of a structure, and this is where we begin to develop different traditions and methods and so on, and progressive paths are developed. Eventually, at some point, we forget that this understanding came from a direct insight. And so we get a sort of reset, and somebody else comes along and says, yes, this is all well and good, but you're forgetting that you can go directly into that. So this is no different. I mean, we're not developing something new. This is just something that it's always been available. And again, it's not a superior way than others. It's just what's available. And it's just a direct way of talking about this, and without trying to reinvent the wheel, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I'll just add a little bit from my point of view. So the way I look at the direct path is the at least the beauty of the direct path is that usually, our true essence is, it's typically shrouded in all types of mysticism, especially coming from all these cultures with their colorful packaging. And the direct path just makes it so, you know, it narrows everything down and gives us, this path that takes us directly to our true essence. And one of the things that I've noticed, is that there are a lot of people who are confused about our true essence, and they think they know intellectually or conceptually. We hear online and a lot of, spiritual circles, you know, I am God, I am consciousness, we are all one. But to what is that experience like? What does it feel like to be that? And the direct path gives us methods experientially to discover ourselves. When we hear something, when we're brought up and we look outside and we see a tree, we say, that's a tree. I know that that's a tree. But how do we really know that that's a tree? Has the tree ever once said that it is a tree? And this would be something along the lines of, intellectual and conceptual knowing. We're passed down this information and then we believe in this knowing. So it's not a true knowing. And then on the other hand, we have knowing that comes from experience. And when we experience something, there we cannot deny whatever it is that we experienced. And the beauty of the direct path is that it allows us to discover our true nature through experience. And that way we can't sit there and guess or be in any type of doubt. We know with absolute certainty who I am.
Yeah, that's I'll build upon that by saying that in practical terms, what the direct path offers as an immediate benefit at all times is that it eliminates confusion. It cuts down confusion at its roots. And again, it's only because we are so trained to conceptualize the world, like you said. We're trained to do that. And that's because we are used to using the mind for understanding, for knowing. And when we do that, we're buying into, so we start, yeah, naming things and giving attributes to things. And this is fine. Like, this is not something that should disappear in our lives. But like I said, direct path cuts the confusion, or rather, same thing of saying, it clarifies that which is and is happening. So through this clear view of reality as it is, you can still have your conceptual mind working. It's very useful. We're sharing a world, and what we have to communicate is these symbols and this abstraction of reality. So it has its uses, but it would not serve to see the truth through it, because it's only a lens through which we can just simply define and identify things for ease of communication, for consensus reality, and for other, again, useful things. So again, I wouldn't want to give the impression that the direct path is a superior method, but I will emphasize why it is so needed at this point. And it's because any other method, of course, of approaching our true nature is valid. It just seems that at this point, especially and we have to acknowledge this, our society right now is brimming with information. There is all of these traditions just bubbling up and being presented to everybody. And this can create or exacerbate even the confusion of the seeker. Think about a seeker who not even 30, 40 years ago was on this path, didn't have the information, and it could only work with what little books were available, maybe some workshops, and travel somewhere else. I mean, these are the limitations that we had in the past. And I would say that the direct path was non-existent at that point for the majority of us. So it's very important to see where we come from in this regard. And all we had was, for hundreds of years, available was the local spiritual expression, which ties in with the religion of our region. And now that we came out of that to the era of information, it's like the whole world exploded with, all these offerings, and all the books are available online, and we have different teachers and so on. And so it's obviously a great thing to have, but how much does that impact the confusion that a seeker originally has and may have going through this process? And so, yeah, all of these paths work. What I find that suits me the best, of course, is something that is it's clear cut, is very scientific in its approach. It's in fact the most scientific thing that we have available, because science just wants to know the nature of reality. And so when we look at the nature of ourselves, we can see the nature of reality. And this is not something that is, and you know this, this is not something that is boring to so and a little bit more. They were already talking about this as, yes, we know that this is the foundation of reality. We're still interested in how it works, but we know this is how it is. So yeah, I think that's the superiority, relatively speaking, of the direct path, or the great benefit that it brings. And I'll just finish up by saying that the combination of whatever we have learned so far on this path with the direct insight of what we are, that combination is beautiful and should be encouraging everybody.
Yeah, I agree with absolutely everything that you spoke about just there. And like you said, it's a very scientifical approach. And the scientist will always take experience as the true test of reality. And that's honestly what I've always loved about the direct path. It's always made me feel it made me feel very secure when I was taking it. There was never a moment in my mind where I doubted any of my understandings because I could actually see it for myself in my own experience. But moving forward, so I would love to know how you came. I know you said this path found you, but I would just love to know how, you know, how this unfolded for you. How did the direct path approach you? How did this all come about?
Yeah, so we have a beautiful contrast, me and you, because as I remember um, your own um, realization of what this really is in our lives, it was a bit different than mine, right? It's like we're on the opposite side of the spectrums. Because in my experience, it was just it was like a logical um unfolding of something that was already being, I'm going to use the word deconstructed already in my mind, because my mind was very stiff and stubborn prior to being interested in these topics. I had a very rigid scientific view of the world, and the softening of this structure began to, um, I guess, show more things about reality that I was completely ignorant about. And I'm mentioning all of this because it'll make sense as to, you know, the point in which you're bringing the question. Because I think my mind needed to be softened this way, just to be deconstructed, like I said, in different conceptual frameworks that I had, um, and to be fully open, right? Open to the possibility of what may be that I'm not aware of. I became very much aware of the nature of reality being consciousness or awareness, to be more precise. And this was all conceptual thinking, as we were saying. I had a lot of conceptual understandings, and um, my mind was running the show, so to speak. Um, it wasn't until probably 2.5 years after my initial uh, interest and shifting of direction in my life that I came across the book of Rupert Spira, The Nature of Consciousness. And somehow, even though I had softened and deconstructed everything, or rather, I allowed the deconstruction of my belief systems to be uh, molded by this interest in non-duality. And the law of one, as you know, has a beautiful metaphysical model of the structure of reality, and an invitation, of course, into this path in its own way. Um, I think all of this conspired in a way to create um, I would say, the foundation for me to experientially, the first this was about, meaning all of this conceptual understanding of oneness and no separation, and the what we call evil in the world, which is just an exacerbation of confusion, and all of these things that I already made sense, and I equated as a sort of resonance with my heart, because you hear truth and you say that's true, yeah, that's right, but you don't feel it fully, you don't feel it exuding out of you, right? That's the difference. And so when you finally touch with this understanding, with this recognition of what you are, is when, and I tell this to everybody who is starting this path, it's like all your concepts start to come alive. Yeah, like your mind used to be in black and white and now it has colors. And that's how the shift happened in me, um, already 3 years ago, when I came across this method, or rather investigation into the nature of our own being. That's what happened. At that point, it was like I had all the foundation ready for it. And once I investigated into it, it has been unfolding, and it continues to be this. There is no end to this, as you know. And so over time, what has happened is that, yeah, all these frameworks that I had constructed, even after I had started deconstructing my old rigid beliefs, and they started to create this new view of the world and unity and uh, spiritual and metaphysical. That's what kind of gave it a different spin. And now the best way I can describe it is that it now has colors, as opposed to the black and whites that used to be my mind.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It it just it blows my mind thinking about hearing your story and knowing where you came from, and now reflecting on how I came about the direct path, and where I was when this method or this teaching found me. And as you know, prior to ever contacting you, um, I was in a very deep place of not only suffering psychologically, but very, very confused. I was going through bouts of anxiety. I was going through depression. I felt very isolated and alone. It felt like I had hit a dead end in life. Like I had tried every single thing I could possibly think of, trying to, looking at it now, I guess trying to feel some sort of fulfillment, or find something that had meaning. And no matter which area I went to, I was always led back right where I started. And one day, I at work, I was on Spotify, and lo and behold, your interpretations of the law of one had found me. And I think it was really the image that you had of Raw on your Spotify list that kind of really grabbed my attention at first. And knowing that I have already did a little bit of I already had a little bit of a background knowledge on who I thought Raw was. And so it really drawed me in. And then from there, I heard, I just from listening to you, there was, a deep resonance. And I started to get into this spiritual path. And just from listening to you, and watching your videos on YouTube, I came to find out that there's this teaching, this non-dual teaching known as the direct path. And I don't there was something about your composure and just your orientation that made me feel like, this guy has found something. This guy has touched something, and I want to know what that is. I want to know what this peace, this happiness, this equanimity that my friend Gabe is embodying. I haven't met too many people that had this, this type of energy, and it really drew me in to want to know more about the direct path, non-duality, and myself in general. So I really came from this dark place, and somehow found, I guess, like you said, it really found me. Now that I look at it, I wasn't out there searching for any of this information. I didn't even know what non-duality was. So this was a whole new world, just opening up right in front of my eyes. And yeah, it's been a beautiful journey since I started. And like you said, this is one of those things that it's just, never ending. It's a constant recognition, and yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because that allows me to highlight a couple of things that are to me important in terms of why this investigation, uh, which gives us direct insight into the nature of our being, is available to everybody. You see, another contrast that we express here together is the fact that, and obviously, in your case, these are the most dire, um, I would say, people who can benefit from this, from going into an investigation that is going to take him out from uh, that valley of despair, right? But on the other side, there's people like me who I've never felt a deep depression in my life, admittedly. I always say that my story is not very compelling. It's not one of those that is very flashy. But at the same time, that makes it very relatable to a lot of people who are just simply interested in this and, what's the benefit of it. Um, so I did find a devotion in myself that was dormant in me for possibly 20 years or so, since I completely renounced religion and everything else. But yeah, my life wasn't affected. It was a very joyful part of my life. In fact, I was going through an era of, yeah, self-discovery in other ways, finding a new career and reigniting a new path or a new phase in my family relationships with my wife and my brothers and my parents and everything. It was just a, a beautiful moment. So what precipitated my seeking was just my curiosity, an interest in, I don't know anything about reality. I thought I knew. I thought I had reality figured out thanks to science, but it seems like I'm missing the biggest portion of the whole creation. So that's one of the things I feel like everybody can benefit from, just uh, finding where their curiosity is leading them. There's a reason why people are interested in this. And so finding where that curiosity may lead them, the extent with which they're going to derive this benefit is dependent upon the strength of their seeking, which again, it's nothing to be forced, and at the same time, nothing you can't resist. You see, it's happening already, so just follow that curiosity. And yeah, the fact that this is, like you said, it's a very scientific way of looking at reality through experience. Uh, I think that's what resonated with me as well, is the fact that I didn't have to commit to a specific practice. I didn't have to go through a specific step program or something. It was available right now. And what's interesting is that that process, as you will know, the way I break it down into a seemingly separate steps, they all form a cycle, and that cycle begins to roll in your mind, unfolding constantly, which is what you said, recognition, constant recognition of yourself. So that once it locks in, it's impossible to get rid of it. You keep going and going, and it keeps delivering more and more. And the last thing I'll say, because I think this is very important, is that we believe, and I certainly believed at some point in my seeking, especially in the first couple of months. I'm grateful that I I didn't get stuck. I found non-duality pretty quickly in my journey, and I resonated a lot with the Zen tradition, which to me is, it has this beauty. We can get into this if you want, but the beauty of the Zen tradition is that they don't even have a method. I would say the direct path is more of a methodical approach than anything, related to Zen. Zen has no methods at all. We think that they have methods, and that's not true. That's not true Zen. But the point is that I used to believe also at the beginning that no, this is for somebody who, is committed for life, or you have to be born in the right place or family or something like that. And to find that this is available to every one of us, to the extent, like I said, that we want, which is not guided by some mental whim that we have, is guided by our own will, the direction of our will, and the curiosity that I mentioned. Yeah, to find that is just, it's amazing. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, so the great thing about the direct path is it's for anybody. You don't have to be a sage or a guru or a monk. All that's really and necessarily required is, and I take this from you, your unwavering desire to just know yourself. And as long as you hold that, and your curiosity is strong enough, then these understandings are fully available to the seeker. And it doesn't come from, at least I don't believe it does come from any particular tradition. And I like the fact that you brought up Zen, because I didn't I didn't come from any type of religious background. My parents had a little bit of church things going on when I was younger, but there was zero presence of any type of God in my entire life. And I've told you this, I kind of had this innate feeling that we are all the creator of our reality. People used to ask me, what is your take, what do you believe in? And I honestly, I didn't really know, but my answer always was that, you know I truly believe that we create our own destiny, that we are the creators of um our reality. And so that leads me to ask you the question: did you come from any type of religious background or, traditions? Because I feel like this is, it can help somebody maybe that is coming from one of those areas kind of venture on and explore the direct path.
Yeah. Um, so I come from a Spanish culture that is mainly Catholic. That's our belief system in the country where I'm from, Venezuela. And I remember having I was very devout, especially in the years of the First Communion. I think that's what you call it also, right? In uh, in the United
I'll be
States.
honest, I do not know.
Yeah, I think it's the First Communion. That's one of the sacraments that we go through. And for that, as a child, you need to be prepared for this, and you have to go to church and to study the Bible and so on. So I grew up. My family was not very committed to Catholicism, but I grew up with the Bible and so on. But I think that was the moment in which the devotion that I remember in me came to its full expression. And I remember being so devout to God that, yeah, that stayed with me. And I remember feeling not a, it's a very noumenal connection with God. It wasn't a uh, an abstract God that I was thinking of. It was just something that felt to me so real, and at the same time, I had no way to understand it, but only see the expression of it. And so this was the peak of my religious time. I would say that at the age of 11 or 12, when I became more aware of biology, chemistry, physics, and science, that's when my interest started to go more into that, and eventually to see the exposure of what religion has done in the world. And I associated God with that. And to me, it became tainted, we should say. And I actually became an atheist. And I said, I don't believe in God anymore because there's no proof and so on. And I went down that path. However, I did remain a believer, but it was a believer of science. And in science, you you believe in the the God particle, right? And I don't mean, the Higgs boson or whichever it is right now that they talk about. Uh, I think is the idea that the universe is made out of particles, right? So that's our God. Our God is matter. Yes. And so I believed in that. Like that was my God. Everything is matter, and things can be described in terms of motion and so on. So I bought into that, and that was my religion. I wasn't aware that that was a religion, but I understand that now because you believe it, right? You have to believe it. There is no proof of that. And you don't know that there is no proof until you actually do the investigation. So that's what, led me to uh, first to question the reality of my beliefs, and then, of course, to investigate it. And that's where I would say that it's interesting, Jay, but it wasn't until probably last year, I would say, I can't remember the exact moment, when I still had a, I would say, an underlying thought pattern, a resistance to feel myself devoted to God. Even to say the word God to me was still sort of, it was banned from my vocabulary. It felt weird. um, and to admit that I had a devotion for God, it felt even stranger. So it wasn't until probably a year ago where I allowed myself and I said, what am I denying? I'm denying, the true force of what I'm living for. And it's when I felt that child 30 years ago regained its devotion towards this understanding, now meeting God, face to face and saying, oh, this is what you have always been.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You got a taste of, you know, two different sides of, ways that people look at reality or choose to believe in. And that's pretty substantial in my eyes from for you to come from these two places and end up with this realization and understanding. But how let's let's talk about how the direct path has what are the implications of the direct path, and how has it impacted your life?
Yeah, so that's a pretty amazing question because we're talking about the implications of truth in a world that is so confused, in a world that exhibits so much of the sorrow of being confused. Yes, the byproduct of being confused is tragedy and all these exacerbated negative emotions. What is the power of truth? See, how can truth begin to override this? And what will it override this with? So I think the first thing is that we need to be committed to truth. Like we said just a couple of minutes ago, true scientist is committed to truth, and it can only find truth in experience. And if we go down this path and we don't have any preconceived ideas of what truth is, then we will find what everybody has found in history that has been called a prophet, a mystic, a messenger of God, and so on. It's interesting because all of them have left um, a legacy that is remembered with love, devotion, and a wisdom that goes beyond the mind, right? All of these beautiful figures that we have in worship, and that we adore with our hearts, whatever that may be. It doesn't even have to be a figure. It could be a teaching, it could be anything else. But that's because we find truth in what they said. We find wisdom, we find love. So it seems that, and again, this is something that, as you know, we all have to investigate. We can't just take somebody else's words for granted. We have to investigate and find that the nature of our own being, the truth of our existence, is actually the emanation, or rather the emanation of this truth of reality is what we call love and connectiveness and the compassion that comes out of just knowing that I am you, you are me, we are all the same. We are all the same I. So as we begin to feel this, and again, not as a belief system, although it sounds amazing. And if I could say, get one belief, then hold on to this belief, right? That's the one belief that I would say, invest all your mind in that. And in fact, I would say the seeking mind should hold on to this belief as long as possible, or as long as there is a thinking mind. Then we will find the implications in our individual experience, meaning that we all have a background of confusion. We have all synthesized a world based on confusion. So individually, we must go through this confusion. This is what we call the darkness within us, and the inner child that hasn't healed, and so on. All these different ways to express the ignorance, or rather, I don't like the word ignorance as it seems to uh, evoke the idea of a negative connotation, but just the unknowing. I simply didn't know. So go into this deep darkness and begin to illuminate that darkness with this truth that you have found, and the implications individually will shine within your own experience, because you have created, like you said, we have created this life, this view of the world. So by shining that, that's the implication that is within, and that radiation of shining, or the shining of this light of understanding, will begin to impact, even indirectly, everybody else. So in my case, this is something that I don't know what the extent of my expression has been. It's difficult for me to measure that, but individually, I can see that all the things that have been hidden, and I'll add one more thing related to this, which is important to know. I know that all those things within me that were needed at the moment were exposed to the light of awareness and truth, and they continue to be so. What I wanted to add is that for anybody that is undergoing this process is, and you should know this too, Jay, the biggest things that, or rather, the greatest monsters that we will face will be the first ones, because those are the ones that are waiting for us to be confronted from the beginning. Once you confront the biggest guy in the mind, the darkest one, every one of them is going to be a step down, just like those Russian dolls. It's going to be another and another and another, until it becomes just so subtle. It's just like little things that come to your mind, and they're like echoes of the past. And it's it's like an overwhelming sensation of compassion that flushes over you, and it never stops. It'll be foolish to think that you would reach a point in which there is no more of this feeding. It's almost like light feeds from the darkness, and there's, you know, an infinite amount of light that can be summoned, and of course an infinite amount of darkness that is out there. So in colloquial Americanism, bring it on.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And I'll be honest, I don't know how much more I can add to that, but I would like to offer at least a condensed version of what I feel like are the implications of knowing who we are, and that's mostly coming from my experience, and it's through discovering this truth of who we are and the nature of reality. We subsequently discover that, you know, we are the happiness, the peace, the love that we've been seeking for our whole life. You know, for me, I was seeking this state of, you know, equanimity through substances, relationships. I used to masquerade myself with video games. There wasn't a single thing that I didn't have my hand in, because I had this huge sense of lack. I constantly felt like I was lacking something. And through discovering who I am, you know, I've been able to find out that I am actually this very source of peace, love, and joy that I've been searching for my entire life. And I think that's probably one of the biggest implications that, you know, I could ever express to somebody, especially coming from the background that I have, you know, coming from a place of, um, like I said, substance abuse, and just overall, you know, being lonely and bored, to now feeling, you know, whole and complete, and having an abundance of happiness, an abundance of love and joy, and being able to share that with everybody, and seeing not only how much it has impacted my own story, but seeing how this peace and love radiates to others around me. And, you know, it's just like we say, you don't go out into the world and change it externally. You change yourself, and the world around you changes. And it's true. It's absolutely 100% true. So yeah, the to anybody who may be considering the direct path coming from a place where I did, I can honestly say that this this investigation into our true nature is the greatest form of liberation that one could ever have. There's not anything else that I could ever recommend to somebody other than the absolute knowledge of knowing who we are. And when you know who you are, you know peace and happiness.
Yeah. I think um, we also get a novel understanding of what peace and happiness is. Because you're right, um, we have a taste of peace and happiness, but it seems to be always in dualistic terms because it's associated with, like you said, activities that we're so used to that bring a sense of it's if anything, I would call it a alleviation of conflict, for example, right? We're not aware we're living with conflict inside ourselves. We're used to it. It's almost like it became our natural state. And we know that a lot of people sustain higher levels of conflict and they reflect it outwardly, right? So we first need to acknowledge that we have conflicts, that we have negative emotions, that we have all these things. And from there, we can start to understand how the mind is working. So our sense of peace, it's an alleviation of that conflict to a degree that is measurable to our mind that is in a high state of conflict. And so we begin to see peace as this valleys, right? Valleys within the conflicted mind, or it could be anger, sadness that we're used to, right? And so these valleys of happiness happen. That's where we find substances or activities and different types of relationships with the external world that brings these valleys. The thing is that we discover that the valley is bringing us, and I'm talking about a valley here that brings down to happiness or love or peace. The valley is bringing you to yourself. So when you dive deep into yourself, you get this overwhelming sense of all these emotions, right? Which is not really an emotion. It's a it's a feeling. It's a feeling of what we call truth, what we call the self. So it feels like, and I think I have my theory on this, that when our minds are so used to this agitation, it becomes very uncomfortable being here. So that's why we say, oh, it's difficult for me to meditate. You know, it's difficult for me to to try to remain present, right? So it doesn't matter because once you see, you cannot unsee it. So those valleys which make us feel right. Hopefully, I'm making my point clear that the association that we have usually with peace, love, happiness, harmony, they're just little tastes of what this, you know, uh, deep dive into ourselves is. So when we rest there, we see that as the foundation. We've always been there. You know, it's not like we were out up there. It's just that out of here, we created a I would say a sort of current of agitation of mind that we're used to. But as we go and we sink deeper and deeper and deeper into it, and we begin to get accustomed there. And hopefully in this visualization, you can see that everything that we do in the spiritual path is basically, just coming down, to the self, coming down to the self, eroding the patterns that make us be outside of ourselves, so to speak, in this way. So I think that's a key distinction to me, that we also redefine and understand, re-understand what peace, happiness, joy really is as a foundation of what we are, because we taste it by simply looking at ourselves.
Yeah, I love the fact that you brought that up, and I love your analogy of the valley. And I don't mean to give anybody the wrong impression on, what this peace and happiness is. Like, we're walking around 24/7 with this joyous smile on our face at every single person and every single thing. But like you said, we are so accustomed to this agitation of the mind, these unkind stories that are on replay and bombarding us from the time we wake up till the time we go to sleep. And what happens is when we dip down into this valley towards our true essence, and we stay there, this cessation of the agitation of the mind, it comes to an end. And in contrast to that agitation, we can call it peace. We can call it happiness. And yeah, that's just, my view on things. And yeah, you made a really good point.
Yeah, you use the word that I try to use myself to normalize this referential that we have with words, and it's equanimity. See? Because equanimity it's a mixture of all of this. It's being at peace with what is. It's being, your natural states is not disturbed, and you're okay with things. You're not resisting them. You're not trying to control them. You're just in that state of acceptance. And even the word acceptance seems like there is somebody or something accepting or allowing. There is no such thing as allowing and disallowing. There is just space accepts everything. But it doesn't mean that it has the quality of denying the existence of a particular form. So yeah, that's the state. It's just simple equanimity.
Gabe, I think that covers about everything that, I wanted to talk with you here today. I just want to say again, thank you for being here with me today, for sharing presence, for sharing your love of this path, and, just everything that you do. And yeah, just know that I'm grateful for our friendship, our connection, and yeah,
Well, I'm going to return the gratitude back to you for being uh, so genuinely interested and also a messenger of this understanding. I think it goes without saying that you have been doing an amazing job at expressing truthfully what you feel about this. I think that is the most unique way we can express the will of the creator as we know it, the will of God, whatever word suits us, or simply the curiosity of awareness, the curiosity of the child within us. And I want to thank you for that too, for being a brother in this path.
I appreciate you, brother Gabe. With that being said, I hope you have a wonderful night, a restful evening, and I'll speak to you later.
Like I say,